It's hard enough to win a championship, let alone when you're making very common mistakes. In this video today, Mike and our special guest Jesse are diving into very common mistakes contending teams make. So if you want to secure that championship and make sure you're contending throughout the rest of the season, be sure to stay tuned. Above all else, I do hope you all enjoy the video. Please leave a like if you do. Comment down below your thoughts on the video itself. What are some very common mistakes maybe you've made as a contending team or you've seen other contending teams make? Maybe let us know what questions you have about contending and strategies of that sort. But hey, with all that said, let's get right to the content you came for.
We're going to talk about the mistakes we're making and how we're going to fix them. What is the first mistake that we're going to be talking about tonight?
Yeah, I think this is an important topic of conversation because my number one is identifying your roster correctly, which means like sometimes your record may be better than your team is, you know? So like you might be 4-2 or 5-1 and your points for is super low. That's a problem. And, you know, eventually it's going to catch up to you because you might be starting off the year against the weaker teams or the rebuilding rosters. You know, you're getting these wins, you stockpile them, but your overall points for is low. You know, you might run into issues as the season comes on and as you take on the harder schedule and, you know, the better teams in your league. So I think that's really key because like right currently in the league, I'm 4-2, but like my team really isn't that good. So like I made some trades, you know, to kind of pull back the reins a little bit. And, you know, identified my roster, what I think is correctly.
You know, I got a question for you. Well, I got you here. We're talking about trades and identifying your roster. But let's do an active, you know, identifying your team. So I have a team that's 3-3. Like your 4-2 team, I don't think it's that good, to be honest with you. Right now, if the playoffs were to start today, I would be the 6th seed. So I would be in the playoffs. Somebody offered me a trade today. And tell me if you would take this, okay? Because I didn't want to flat out decline it. They want my Dameon Pierce, who, if you guys are familiar with Nate Christian on the show, he's been saying sell Dameon Pierce. He's a committee back at best. So he wants my Dameon Pierce, and they're offering me a 2023 second, a 2023 third, and oddly enough, $59 in fab. What do you think about a trade like that for a team like that?
It sounds like the middle of the run team, you know, like you're kind of the tweener team, you know, and that's like, yeah, that's the hardest spot to be in is like a tweener because you're not sure if you should buy or sell. I would try to get 2 seconds out of him. I would like that deal if I can get a second out of him. Yeah, I'm not the biggest Pierce fan, but they said he had like 17 broken tackles. That was like the highest PFF ever graded. And that's pretty nice. Yeah, I think if I can get 2 seconds out of him, I think I'd be really I'd be on board with that.
I'm setting the counter right now because I like 2 seconds a lot better than the second and the third. And the fab is, you know, it's like I have $100 in fab right now. People don't go crazy bidding with fab in this league. So like generally if someone's on the waiver wire, like at most a $10 bid will get the guy. All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to send a counter offer right now for 223 seconds for Dameon Pierce because it's a guy that I would have been looking to actively sell at the end of the season anyway. But there's a possibility his value could go down.
Right. And then, you know, these guys, they get drafted and the free agent class for running backs next year, well, going into the 23 season is massive. I mean, the list is long and big. So I assume that the teams are going to add depth and, you know, pieces through the draft. So yeah, if I have these tweener players, I'm 100% looking to, you know, sell them.
I'm going to keep my eye on my phone, see if he accepts it. Hopefully he accepts it while we're doing this podcast together. But let's move on. So my first mistake is overpaying for a player that will, and I quote, take you over the top. You know, maybe this guy thinks that Dameon Pierce is going to take him over the top. And if he thinks that, great. I know you want to win it all, but when you start your trade negotiations, start low. Maybe this guy was willing to pay 2 seconds, but he just wanted to try a third first. Start small and work your way out. Don't just throw out all your draft capital. You know what I mean? Don't just get crazy with it. Jesse, what's the second mistake that you want to talk about?
So I think my second mistake is don't give up potential young studs for older established players coming off injuries. And there's 2 players that I think is a buy, one of them, and the other one I would never go near. But Keenan Allen and Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas, I won't go near. I want 0 parts of.
Really?
Keenan Allen. Yeah, I just don't know how much he wants it at this point, man. Like
that's a good point.
You know, like he missed a year, almost 2 years, and then he's still hurt. You know, he's out. He's sitting out. So I mean, if I can give him for maybe like a second, maybe I would do that. But overall, and Keenan Allen, I really like as a buy, but for what you have to pay for him, I'm not interested in him at price. Like the example I used is like a guy like Jamison Williams. He's a guy I'm not willing to sell for, older proven players. But there are some older proven players I would love to talk about that I think are buys, but just not at the risk of your whole future.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
One older player that I'd love to buy, DeAndre Hopkins.
He was on my list. Yep.
Perfect.
He's a perfect one. Another one that I love is Mixon, because he's not so old where you can't get a second year out of him. And I think you could use him for the rest of this year and next year, and before you got to ultimately dump him.
I feel like nobody's talking about Joe Mixon, which kind of makes him a really good, I don't want to say buy low candidate, but buy lower than what you normally would for a starting caliber running back in the NFL.
Dude, he's averaging 5.5 targets a game, which is up from 3 last year. That's almost double. I mean, he's getting 17 carries a game. He's seeing 70% of the snaps. He's only scored 1 touchdown. I think last year he had 12, something like that. So yeah, I mean, he's a guy that I would definitely be looking to buy if if I was going after it. That's kind of where I go. But to the original point, I'm not really interested in selling off my young studs for older proven, like Zeke Elliott. People are wanting to buy Zeke right now. I want nothing to do with Zeke.
But I agree. I want no part either. And I have an update. Trade has been accepted. I just got 223 thirds for Dameon Pierce. So fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. It was seconds, right? Not thirds. 2
seconds. 2 seconds.
Perfect.
Yeah, which I'm okay with.
And another thing off topic, but what I love doing is combining a second with a player for a first, or combining a player with a third for a second, they're like sweeteners, but you're really doing more than just a sweetener.
My number 2 mistake, not paying attention to the waiver wire because you don't need that guy. I've talked about this before, but I really feel like it's important. There are 2 circumstances where I missed out on players, and I shouldn't have because I was lazy and I didn't need that guy. 1, Robert Tonyan. I don't need him. I have whatever top 24 tight end that I think is the shit right now. I have Bryson Hopkins. I don't need Robert Tonyan. Number 2, I'm not going to put a waiver claim in on James Robinson. I'll put one in on Raekwon Armstead instead.
The James Robinson one, man, gets me.
But okay, in all fairness, how many people got burned on that one?
When I was in my home league, our fab resets at the beginning of the year for whatever reason. And I forgot, and I didn't put enough fab on him. And I should just blew through all my fab for him. And then the kid gets him over him, and he has this monster rookie year, good second year. James Robinson, man, hurts the heart a little bit.
Just pay attention to the other people in the league as well, like what they're doing. I saw this one guy I was playing against had no quarterbacks. I threw $100 bid on PJ Walker, so then he really had no quarterbacks, so he was forced to trade me a 3rd round pick for PJ Walker, who then got hurt and didn't help his team at all. But hey, I got a third out of it. So Jesse, what is your next mistake?
Man, that's a great idea, man.
Listen, but you have to be aware of what's going on in the league. You can't just singularly focus on your team. That's not how you get ahead. And I used to do that. I used to be so narrow-minded and focused on my team. Now I'm looking at standings. I'm looking at people's roster. Now, I'm here to win.
Dude, the money talks, right?
Exactly. Well, what's your next mistake?
Sometimes wait a week. I know that sounds odd. If you're 4-1 or even 3-2 and you're a top scorer, you might be able to wait a week before addressing, because not necessarily for you, but for other teams, because teams that are on the fringe might be sellers if they lose a week, and that's key. Timing in Dynasty is everything, in my opinion. When to pull, a trade off, when to go after a player, values. It's so explosive and just volatile that it goes week to week sometimes with these guys, and especially like the middle tier guys, the depth pieces. Sometimes you get them for cheaper than you originally had hoped for. I mean, I have an example of this. In that home league that I was just talking about, I was trying to get Kyle Pitts. I have no tight end. It's not a tight end premium, but like my tight end position got me like 30 points on the year. And we've been talking Kyle Pitts, and I have Jamar Chase, I have AJ Brown, and I have DK Metcalf. Those are my 3 big stud wide receivers. And every time we talk Kyle Pitts, he wants one of the 3 wide receivers, right? And I didn't want to give him to him, you know? And he had made a big trade for Cooper Kupp. He spent 2 firsts and a Kenneth Walker. So he was in buy now, you know? And I was like, man, he could use some depth. So I was like, okay, now you tell me if this is a good trade. I moved Chris Godwin and Courtland Sutton for Kyle Pitts, and then I got Tony Pollard as you know, a sweetener in the deal. And
that's what I have to say about that. You didn't give up what you didn't want to give up. That's and you got Tony Pollard on top of it. There's a very good possibility Tony Pollard's a starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys next year or the year after that. I think it's possible, right? Or he's a starting running back somewhere. He's good enough.
Yeah, he's a restricted free agent too. So, you know, that was kind of why I was targeting him. And he was a player who I noticed that the manager was kind of willing to get rid of. He had put him on the trade block. That's another thing. Pay attention to trade block, man. Sometimes add these guys in because people may want them off their roster, and you'll take them. I'll take Tony Pollard. And, you know, if I can get him with the player that I want, you know, it's like it goes the opposite way also. Like, you know, getting these Pashenko was a perfect one from Kansas City. You know, like adding him into deals, you know, people don't realize it, but you're getting kind of a good player.
So great. I love it. Wait a week. Hey, sometimes that's the best advice. Basically, what we could boil that down to is don't panic. Don't panic buy, don't panic sell. It's a good way of thinking about it too, because people tend to do that.
And perfect example is Hollywood Brown, right? Like team just lost Hollywood Brown. Now I'm a buyer, right? You know, before I wasn't a buyer because I had Hollywood Brown, this and that. Now I lost a player like Hollywood, you know, unexpected injury, and boom, now we add to that.
My next one, not thinking about next year. I think this one gets overlooked. People just get so, and this goes back to looking at your league, the rest of the league. People get so focused on their team, just trying to win it all now. Don't leave the cupboard bare. Unless you plan on bouncing from this league, unless you want to bring it home and win the ship and then just dip. But this is a dynasty league, so you're planning on being in it for more than just this 1 year. If you're making trades, even if you're making the big boy trades where you're getting these big time players, try to get some sort of draft capital back, even if it's late picks or even if it's lesser players, like guys in a committee, high ceiling, low floor wide receivers that might take a little bit, guys that you can move and maneuver around in the off season to try to get back into next year's draft. That's one of the things that I do. Always just try to get a little something back. Jesse, what is your next one?
It was pay attention to overall standings when it comes to buying players. Know which rosters are buys and which ones are sells. You don't want to go to a team that's, you know, 5-1 looking to buy, you know, DeAndre Hopkins from, let's say, or, buy one of these players. The team that you want to, or you hope that has these players are the teams that are at the bottom of the barrel because they're more willing to accept trades. They're more willing to, you know, move these established players for draft capital. Because that was another point. Like draft capital is your friend when you're a team that's in the top echelon. But also, you know, you don't want to leave yourself, like you said, naked in the draft because, you know, the draft is ideally the way you make your team better moving forward. So like, yeah, we want to all make the paper and win, but in the reality, there's only 1 or 2 people that make money back. And then everybody else is kind of in it for next year. You don't want to leave yourself naked in the draft. You know, use that as your friend because like a guy like Hopkins or, you know, another guy I think is a good buy for a team that, you know, is competing is Nick Chubb or even Dalvin Cook. You know, these guys aren't necessarily roster builders for young, you know, startup teams or, you know, up and coming teams. So like, you know, you go to those teams and you know, the 6 through 12 teams or the 7 through 12 teams, and you see what kind of players they have on the bottom of their roster and you kind of pick off of them.
Last one, and this kind of goes right into everything we've been talking about today. Last mistake, not having enough depth. Like I feel like a lot of guys, they stack their starting lineup with studs, which is great from weeks 1 through 4. And then injuries start to happen, bye weeks start to come in, and the team starts to unravel because you don't have that depth. For example, you could have sold the farm to acquire Javonte Williams. Look how that turned out. And you know what? I'm trying to buy Javonte Williams everywhere I can right now because I still believe. You know, maybe your other back was a Chase Edmonds type. Like you sold the farm for Javonte and you're like, I'm going to go with Javonte and Chase Edmonds will do something. Or you could have made the smart play and did what I've been telling you to do all season and draft or trade for Miles Sanders and Devin Singletary, and you would be smashing right now. Except for week 7, they're both on buys. Don't just go for big names. Use your assets to fully load your roster to withstand injuries in bye weeks. And one thing I've been starting to do more, I know people say Dynasty doesn't matter as much as redraft. Look at the bye weeks. I start looking at bye weeks before the season. So if I need to make moves, I do it early as I possibly can.
I kind of like to go after the guys who have stigma, right? Like right now, Deontay Johnson's a guy. He has like a stigma around him. People don't want him. And I was never a Deontay Johnson guy. Okay. But, like Juju's another guy. He had a really big week, so he's going to be hard to buy at this point because now everyone's going to be like, oh, he's Mahomes number 1. But pre this week, see, this is what I'm saying. Like sometimes, timing is everything, right? You go after a guy when he goes 1 for 7, versus when he goes 5 for 125, whatever it was, and a touchdown. Try to go after the guys that like have a little stigma but are good players. Like Deontay Johnson's probably the cheapest you'll ever get him right now. Pickens is there. Claypool's going to be moved. If it's now or next year, he's going to be moved. Hopefully it's now because then that opens up Johnson and Pickens, and then Claypool gets to go somewhere where he can be effective. But yeah, man, stigma players are like, I'm sorry, I didn't see a video on Burks, but Burks is a perfect guy right now because like his value is probably the lowest it'll ever be.
I agree.
And, pay attention to that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to go about it. I like to kind of do the same thing. Like everyone hates this guy. All right, I'll take him. Before we head out, tell everyone a little about yourself and where they can find you.
Yeah, man, I'm a Twitter guy, man. I'm the man of people on the tweets. So you can find me at Dynasty Humble Senior. That's SR. I'm a man on Twitter. Hopefully, if this kicks off, maybe we can work on something here. And I appreciate you having me on. And, it was really fun. I had a really good time. And thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And Jesse, thank you for coming on. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Well, that is it for the video today. I do hope you all enjoyed. Please leave a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the video itself. What are some common mistakes you see contending teams make, and what mistakes have you maybe made yourself? And be sure to let us know what you thought of our new friend, Jesse. Unfortunately, in Dynasty Fantasy Football, mistakes are not only relegated to the contending team. More often than not, a lot of Dynasty players are making mistakes, whether it comes to rebuilding or Dynasty in general. Check out the 2 videos on your screen right now to make sure you're avoiding those common mistakes in those areas as well, because we all know common simple mistakes can stop a dynasty in its tracks. But hey, that's going to be it for us today. We will see y'all in the next one. But until then, y'all have a good one.